Will, should we get back to the show?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, the next story we have here is about Bolivia. And Will, I believe you wrote this one up, so I'll go ahead and let you talk about it. But it's at RT as Bolivia's interim president withdraws from an upcoming election one day after polls show pro Morales candidate in the lead.
Yeah. So we don't cover Latin America stuff all that often, but maybe we should be covering that region of the world a little more. But I thought this development was very interesting, and it does kind of tie into some stuff that we had covered on your previous show, Foreign Policy Focus in Bolivia. Um, so we have the current so-called interim or acting president of Bolivia, Jeanine Anez, who abruptly dropped out of the presidential race kind of at the last minute. Like there's like the election is next month, so there's just a couple weeks left. And so she suddenly pulled out. She hadn't really given much indication she was going to do that. But she basically cited the same exact reason that you saw like during the US primary when you saw all those Democrats suddenly drop out right around Super Tuesday. The whole idea was to consolidate support around a candidate that has a better chance of winning. So in the US case, obviously that was Joe Biden. But in Bolivia's case, that was Carlos Mesa, who's this like center left guy who had actually been the runner up in the previous election last year, which was this big controversial thing that was all disputed. But we'll get to that in a second. But I think the clear explanation behind Anez dropping out is this recent poll that came out. Like in my headline there, it says one day before she pulled out of the race. But these poll numbers showed that this guy Luis Arce was like way in the lead. Like he had like 40% of the vote, like a massive plurality. And like were he to actually get those poll numbers in the real election, he would win in the first round. Like there wouldn't even be a runoff election between the top two candidates. Because in Bolivia, like if you get 40% of the vote at least, as well as a 10-point lead over the runner-up, the guy in second place, then you just win in the first round. There's no runoff race that they do there. So this poll data really shows this guy's way in the lead. And the interesting thing about this Arce guy is that he is in Evo Morales' former party, the Movement for Socialism. And Evo Morales being the president who was actually like basically ousted from office in what I think you would basically call a U.S.-backed coup last year after the last
Definitely,
election.
no doubt.
Yeah, I think you really could characterize as that. I think this is obviously why Anez is dropping out suddenly. She's trying to throw support to Carlos Mesa in order to prevent Morales' party from coming back to take power after they just got rid of them in the last election, basically. And the whole thing with the last race was like very shady. Like like it was right at the end of the vote. They were counting the ballots, and there was like a brief delay in reporting the numbers that the government did. And then a short time later, the final tally showed that Morales had indeed won. He had just edged out Carlos Mesa for the win. But the opposition started saying that delay in reporting the results, that was somehow like proof that the result was rigged and that they tampered with the numbers. And pretty soon after they started saying that, you had the Organization of American States, or the OAS, which is like this regional bloc of Latin American countries it's headquartered in Washington, D.C. It's heavily funded with U.S. tax dollars, like primarily funded by the U.S., and it pretty reliably takes the U.S. line on pretty much every important issue under the sun. And so this organization, the OAS, started saying that there were irregularities in the vote, and they eventually released this report straight up saying that like the result couldn't be trusted, that it was rigged and not legit. And then the U.S. every step along the way, like pretty much put its rhetorical support behind that. It endorsed the OAS's findings and all that stuff. And at the time, Morales had agreed to a new election. He said like he was down to have another vote. But at that point, there were already these huge opposition protests in the streets, and the military at one point actually basically forced Morales to resign. Like they backed the opposition, and at that point, Morales actually fled the country because I guess after the military kind of turned on him, he felt that he was not safe in Bolivia anymore. But just to me, I think the fact that the front runner of the current race is a Morales loyalist, and he's running under his party, the Movement for Socialism, I think that's fairly significant. That 1 year after Morales was removed from power, it seems that a pretty large segment of the country is still pretty firmly in his camp. And this so-called interim president, Jeanine Anez, is like scrambling now to make sure he doesn't win by dropping out. And the last thing I'll say, the funny thing about Anez too, is that she never actually was elected in the first place. She never won an election. After Morales was like forced out of the country, she just declared herself president. And at the time, she was like a senior figure in the Senate. and she she wasn't actually in the line of succession like the way that in the US, if like the president is taken out and the VP, then like you go to the speaker of the house or whatever. She was not in the line of succession. She just declared herself the president, and then the Senate voted without a quorum to confirm her, and she's just been in power ever since. Like she's just stayed there. No one's really challenged it. But now it seems that like we have some of these poll numbers coming out. Bolivians are not a fan of this Anez lady, and now she will not get a chance to be elected because she's now dropped out of the race. So
So,
that's the deal there.
well, one of the things I remember from the 2019 election, which Morales was, ends up being coup, after winning, is
Right.
that there's this like a weird election rule, at least by American standards in Bolivia, where you could win with 40% of the vote, but then you have to beat your next closest challenger by 10% of the
Yeah.
vote. So you have to get 40 and they have to get less than 30. And so it seemed to me that, maybe while people look at this polling, it doesn't, because I think the like leading guy had like 25 or 30, and then Anya's had about 10, and then the other candidate had over 40. And so it seemed to me that the clear strategy was is to make up that difference. So there has to be, I guess, some kind of runoff election. And I guess they would hope that they end up with a majority of support and could legitimize some kind of coup government by winning an election here. But it seems like the problem that if you're going to have a democracy with legitimate elections, then if the people go out and vote and they want to vote for this reformist loose socialist party of Morales, then how many coups and new elections are you going to have? My fear is that they will exploit like coronavirus to just back up the election if they don't think they're gonna win. We can't do it in December. There's a COVID spike. They yeah, they'll test 100,000 people in a week, and 50,000 of them get test positive for COVID, and then they'll claim that it's a catastrophe and postpone the election by another 6 months. Um, and as you point out that we're now like coming up on a year almost post coup, and it's still the coup government that's in charge. So it kind of shows that this isn't about democracy.
Yeah, absolutely. And the funny thing too is that like Anya, you said like she had like 10% in that poll, and Mesa, the guy in second place, he has like 20 something percent. But it's not totally clear that Anya's 10% will go straight to Mesa. Anya's is like a conservative, like Christian, like theocrat type of figure, whereas Mesa is like a center left figure. So it's not totally clear that all of Anya's supporters are just going to jump right over to Mesa. So that whole gambit they're trying to play there, that might not even win. And yeah, if Morales' guy, if the guy into that party, if he wins, then like I would not be surprised if you do start seeing the OAS start speaking up again and issuing reports about irregularities and all this stuff. So I would watch for that for sure.
Well, I guess it's good to know that it's not a particularly unique feature of a politician to, I guess, essentially believe that whoever will vote for you will just do whatever you want. And so
Right.
anybody who will vote for Bernie Sanders will vote for Hillary Clinton. Anybody who, vote for any of these other Democratic candidates, Tulsi Gabbard or whoever, Elizabeth Warren will vote for Joe Biden, and they just assume that that's the way that democracy works. Like you support a candidate, but if that candidate says support somebody else, you're just going to do that without thinking about the policies of that candidate or anything else. And it's good to see that the South American politicians had that same issue. I'm sure it's just a political thing overall, but